Hello and welcome to the show. Now there are an awful lot of hypercars out there these days. There's a good selection from all sorts of different manufacturers, and while I shall be honest, these are not my thing per se. I mean, I can appreciate the engineering and everything, that they're certainly not my favourite type of cars, especially not now when there is so many very similar ones out there offering kind of similar performance figures. I've got a little bit bored of them. There are a few exceptions, like the Apollo, but on the most part I'm just not the most interested in this category. However, there are a few new ones added to Horizon 5, and naturally I wanted to go and figure out which one was fastest. So I went off and built a route to really test out these cars, at a especially high speed route for these very, very powerful, very high performance vehicles, to see which one would be fastest. Now, we're going to be running these in reverse PI order, and up first we would have the Mercedes. This is the AMG 1 at 877 horsepower. This is one of the less powerful vehicles. It is rare that you get to say that. However, it is one of the less powerful vehicles. It is all-wheel drive though, so it will get a good launch off of the line as we head through these first corners. Now, it is, as I said, it is a very, very high-speed course, this. Most of the corners are well above 120 miles an hour. This is the one more technical sections here, as it changes direction through here. And the Murky's a little bit down on power. It's a little bit down on top speed as well, which, I mean, again, we're talking about an unbelievably fast car here, but in this field, it's doing 185. It's not really, it's just about to crack 190 down this sort of first stretch, and that's quite slow compared to what we might see from vehicles. But it's not just about the top speed, of course. It's good to be able to maintain your speed through these corners. Mercedes struggling a little bit of understeer through there, but gets away with it heading up towards the bridge. There's a little bit of a lift as we head across the bridge again, a further lift. We're still at 150 miles an hour through this section. Now we're into another one of the tight corners. It might even dip below 100, not quite through this. Really got to make sure we get the car stopped. It's easy to get carried away with the very high-speed nature of this circuit and just not think about how much you actually have to slow down for some of these. Mercedes again struggling a little bit with the understeer, heading out towards the edge of the bridge. Just bobbles over the curb. No, not too much of a problem through all of that. Again, wheel on the dirt on the outside, all-wheel drive. It'll get away with it a little bit through here. This is a fast section for the cars now. Kind of a double right-hander. Mercedes again still carrying good speed through all this. Now we come to the one seriously tight corner on the route, the tightest of the lot here as the Merc gets slowed down. It'll dip below 60 miles an hour, jump back on the throttle, and then it's just a drag race really from here until the finish line. It's flat out. That corner, the cars haven't picked up enough speed for that to really be much of a problem. It's just a run towards the finish line now. The Mercedes is up to 180 miles an hour. It's just about climbing, doesn't quite get 190 across the line. And the Mercedes will set the benchmark. A 203.8 is the time to try and beat. We have running next the Zenvo, the TSRS, there we go, I remember the name. The car with the wobbly wing is the easier way to remember it. I do like the Zenvo. It is not sophisticated, if I'm honest with you. Okay, the wing is its party piece, it wobbles, it moves around a bit as it goes through some corners, but this is rather the sledgehammer, if you like, of a car. It has 1,177 horsepower and, as I said, very little in the way of sophistication. It's rear-wheel drive. The front end does not really cooperate. I say that. I mean, we're quicker than the Merc down the straights. We're already up to 190, 200 miles an hour. We're a second down, though, on the Mercedes time. Some of that will be lost off the line because the Zenvo will sit and spin its wheels for a little while before it quite gets going. There's still a big chunk of time to have lost, considering how much faster it was going down that straight. Again, the car does not want to get turned through a very long corner heading onto the bridge. It's a much bigger go on the brakes, a bigger lift as well from the car as the front end just doesn't want to quite get turned in. Now it really will have to be slow the Zenvo down for this next section. It's, I say, you kind of treat it like a point and squirt muscle car in some ways. It's okay, a lot more sophisticated than that, but you've really got to make sure you get it stopped for the corners. Try and make the most of the acceleration where you can, but it's losing a bit more time to the Mercedes now. Is out wide, a little bit of bunny hopping from the car, but it's still there, just about Didn't really lose too much time from it, surprisingly, from his trip a little sideways across the grass, and then we're into this double right-hander. Can't carry the speed. You can see as soon as try to get on the throttle a little too soon, it just wants to understeer itself wide. Again, cannot quite maintain the speed through these corners. There's lost a little bit more time. This is where it will make up well once it's got out of the slow hairpin. If it doesn't lose too much from the wheel spin, even from that corner, these cars huge sticky tyres can put the power down quite well, and it has got a great top. Well, yeah, great top speed. Has got a good top speed compared to that Mercedes. We're already well past the 200 mile an hour mark as it's up towards the finish line. It's definitely not going to beat the Merc though for the Zenvo. I like the car. It's quite the brute. It has a funny wing, but it's not as fast. As much as I do like the Zenvo for what it is definitely by no means quite in the same class as the likes of the Mercedes. It's absurdly silly, but yeah, does not have the grip in that particular contest. We head for a McLaren next. We've got the McLaren Senna. Now this is the second least powerful car that we have in this showdown at 789 horsepower. Yes, I know it's a ridiculous statement and everything, but power is not really going to be this car's forte. This is all about the grip. The Senna is going to make up its time through the corners. It is pretty damn light at 2,800 pounds. It is 1,000 pounds lighter than the likes of the Zenvo and the Mercedes. That's a big difference around a course like this. So it's going to be able to maintain its speed through these corners. And it's certainly no slouch either when it comes to the straight line speed stuff. I mean, it's actually faster than the Mercedes was down here, and we are up in terms of the time through the first sector, only by a tiny little bit. I suspect a chunk of that difference will be from the start line. The Mercedes will be quicker off the line. Of course, the Senna is rear-wheel drive. However, the McLaren can just hold the speed through these corners that the likes of the Mercedes and certainly the Zenvo couldn't. Onto the bridge. It's very, very quick, although still want to get it stopped for the next change of direction and towards the slower section on the circuit here. I mean, it's kind of carrying 10 miles an hour more on the way into that corner alone than we saw from the Zenvo. That's the big difference, and again, it'll be more speed here, only a little lift, maybe a downshift, not quite, from the McLaren, and we're up in terms of the time compared to that Mercedes. Is now a second clear through the next sector. You can visibly see how much more planted it is and how much faster, just more speed it can take through these corners. There's a little tap on the brakes on the way through here. Can keep your foot down or get on the power that bit earlier. Still going to have a big stop, and the traction zone on the exit here is always a concern. The Senna is all of the road through there. It's still going faster. It's 1.5 seconds up now on that Mercedes. It's got that run to the finish line. It's just that drag race, if you like. It's not going to be quicker than the Zenvo down here, but through the rest of the course, it's going to have been far faster. It can maintain that momentum. I mean, it's certainly no slouch down the straights. It's past 190 miles an hour as it heads up towards the finish line. It's a great run from the McLaren, a 201.7 for the Senna. That will put it to the top of the table. It is a couple of seconds faster than that Mercedes, and that is a good showing, actually. It's a good showing for that car indeed. Again, being rear-wheel drive and everything. We next have a little bit of an oddball. The Bugatti Devo is here. Now, this is actually, despite all the electric hypercars to come later on, this is the heaviest car here at 4,300 pounds, but it certainly doesn't feel it. It's got plenty of power. Yep, 1,500 horsepower going on in this one. Plenty of traction as well, of course, being all-wheel drive. It is monstrously fast down these straights, but surprisingly, I was astonished by how much this car weighs, because it doesn't feel it. It can carry so much speed through these corners. I mean, we're well past 200 miles an hour now. We're 1.5 seconds up on the McLaren Senna. It's a phenomenal first sector. I mean, it's almost touching 220 miles an hour. It's really got to be slowed down, though, for these next corners. Yes, it cannot quite carry the corner speed that the Senna could in some places. Again, through here, it just starts struggling a little bit with understeer. Onto the bridge, the back end almost let go, actually, for the Bugatti through there. Once it gets off the bridge, again, can jump on that power. It's thundering its way up, again, almost towards 200 miles an hour. Not going to be able to carry as much speed on the way in here, but once more, focus, make the most of the acceleration where you can with the Bugatti. We're heading up towards the bridge. Don't let the car understeer. It does understeer a little bit wide, but it's still going quicker. We're 2 seconds up on that McLaren. Again, a little more of a tap on the brakes through here for the Bugatti. Again, make sure get the car slow, get it settled. You don't want to run wide there. There's a rock face that will cause all sorts of trouble for the vehicle. More understeer from the car in all of this, but can get on that power once again. Now the hairpin is the final real test for the Bugatti. It's late on the brakes. It will get stopped pretty damn well in all of this. Go for a little bit of a late apex and jump on the power with 2 seconds up still on that centre, about the same through that next sector, and then we've got the run to the finish line, and this is where the Bugatti will be fast. It is accelerating, it's past 200 miles an hour, it's still going. As it gets up towards the finish line, it's almost 220 across the line for the Devo. The 158.1, a very quick time for that Bugatti. As I said, it might be the heaviest car here. It really, really doesn't feel it. I don't know how it works. It's some magic in that because it handles amazingly well for the type of vehicle that it is, and that has set a pretty damn good benchmark. From Aston Martin, we have got the Valhalla. This is the sort of concept car, I think, that became the Valkyrie, if I'm remembering my cars correctly. But it's an interesting thing, this. I mean, we've still got 1,000 horsepower in this. It's 3,000 pounds, so it's not much heavier than the McLaren Senna, considerably lighter than that Devo. We're once again all-wheel drive, so can get a good launch, and it feels lively through the corners, this car. It feels a very, very nice vehicle to drive. There's a little lift coming onto this straight. Now, it doesn't quite have the ludicrous power levels that we saw from the Bugatti, but it's certainly no slouch down the straight. We're going to pass the 200 mile an hour mark. It's down on the Bugatti's time, though, with 0.4 of a second down. Perhaps not the biggest surprise in the world. The Bugatti can make the most of its top speed in that section. Now, we might expect to see the Aston Martin manage to claw back some of that ground through these next couple of corners. We expect Valhalla to be a little bit better. It carries good speed onto the bridge through all of this. It's maintain your momentum where you can. It's a little bit deep, though, into the twisty section for the Aston Martin. Does get on the power again, and it's a bounce across the grass. No real harm done out wide there. Still trying to get on the power. It's close. It's close to the Bugatti. Only lost about 1/10 in all of that. Again, trying to carry as much speed. You want it to be, you want to have as sort of wider an arc into the corners as you can, so the cars are literally on the edge of the road. It's all-wheel drive, it'll get away with that as we're heading towards these final few corners. Now, the Aston Martin's carrying great speed through here. It just doesn't, I mean, it has got good turn-in. It's gained some time on the Devo, but you can still see it's struggling a little bit with understeer in a couple of these very, very fast corners. It just doesn't quite have the turn-in. Not the turn-in we saw from the Senna, and now it's the acceleration. It's the run towards the finish line for the Aston Martin. It's quick, but it's not going to be Bugatti fast, so unless it's made up a lot of time in the hairpin, it's not going to be beating that Devo. I mean, it's 208 miles an hour across the line, but it does not have the acceleration of the Devo. It's close, a 58.9 for the Aston Martin. It'll put it into second place in all of that. It gains its speed a little bit differently to the Devo. The Valhalla is a smidge quicker in the corners, but not by quite enough. The Devo's such a monster down those straights, and still surprisingly competent in the turns, that Bugatti will continue to lead the way. But this is the Giant Slayer up next. The Ultima Evo. 1,000 horsepower in a car that weighs just 2,000 pounds. Power to weight ratio in this is astronomical, but it's rear-wheel drive, and it's not exactly what you would call the most high-tech of cars here. It's a ridiculous little contraption. It's always an absolute riot to drive because it's terrifyingly quick. Doesn't quite have the crazy aero that we've seen from some of the vehicles, so this is going to be all about the acceleration, and hope it's quick enough. Accelerating is already up to almost 200 miles an hour. The Ultima is insanely fast. We're through the first split. We're down a little bit on the Bugatti, although it's going to be making time up. It's actually running out of gears down this section. It's 230 miles an hour the Ultima was touching there. I mean, it's still good through the corners, don't get me wrong here. This thing is carrying, surprisingly, you can see it's carrying good corner speed here. It's just always a little bit sketchy in the Ultima. You've got to have a lot of respect for the car because it will bite, it will snap, it will throw you at a wall if you are not careful. It's almost 200 miles an hour again as it gets slowed down, much like the Valhalla. It's a little bit quick on the way in, but can make the most of that acceleration when the car is pointing in the right direction, get it onto the bridge. We're 7/10 of a second up on the Bugatti. All of that technology, all the all-wheel drive, all of that in the Devo is not enough to overcome incredibly powerful, lightweight British kit car almost. We've got a few more corners to go now. This is where it gets a little sketchy in the Ultima. You've got to be very careful with that throttle. It's easy to get it into trouble through all of this. Again, you just cannot quite carry the speed in this car, but this is almost 2 seconds up on the Bugatti. Now it's still making up time around here. Now is the drag race, and this is where the Ultima will excel. You can see it wants to spin the wheels up, doesn't quite hit all of this, and now it can use all of that power, all of that acceleration up towards the finish line. We're already at 200 miles an hour as it launches itself towards this. It's 220, almost 230 across the line. It's ridiculously quick accelerating. It's a 55.9 for the Ultima. That will take it to the top of the table. A second and a bit clear of the Devo. And let's not forget the Devo is many millions of credits, many millions of pounds worth of car, and the Ultima is 300,000 credits. It's crazy. Value for money, the Ultima is ridiculous. It is, as I said, it is the ultimate giant slayer pretty much. Though it's got some interesting competition. The Apollo, my favourite of the modern hypercars. It looks absurd. I appreciate it's not for everybody, but I love it. Especially in purple carbon fibre, that is the way to go. This is the least powerful car here, 780 horsepower, but it doesn't weigh very much at 2,700 pounds. And bloody hell does it stick to the road. I don't quite know how, I don't quite know what it does, but the Apollo is absolutely phenomenal through these corners. The mid-corner speed that this car can take is like nothing else you will see in this showdown, but it has to, because its straight line speed is good, but nothing like we saw from the Ultima. We're 7/10 of a second down on the Ultima, and that's largely to do with straight line speed. The thing is, the Apollo just doesn't need to brake. Through all of this section, it's flat out, a little bit of a lift. It's still carrying 170, 180 miles an hour. It's flat onto the bridge at 180 miles an hour, and it's still not had to lift the whole way through this section, but it's got to make its lap time up here. It's got to make up its stage time, if you like, because as soon as we get onto these longer straights, that's where the Apollo is going to struggle. A little bit of lift on the way. Won't be flat absolutely everywhere, and it is absolutely flying through these twisty bits. It's almost a second clear of the Ultima. Once again, no problems, flat all the way through these next corners. This one may be a little bit of a lift. I don't think so. Through there, holding at 160 miles an hour. It does need a little lift and a downshift. Back on the power immediately. Out the other side. One more big braking zone to go, and the Apollo is absolutely flying. It's 2 seconds clear of the Ultima, but again, it needs all of this time because we are not going to be touching 230 miles an hour. It almost slides its way out of the hairpin with just this acceleration zone to go. I mean, the Ultima, sorry, was doing 180, 200 miles an hour by this point. The Apollo is not as quick at all here as we're heading up towards the finish line. Is it going to have been enough? It crosses the line, and it is going to be a 155.6 for the Apollo. That is one hell of a run from the car, and that will put it to the top of the table. The Apollo takes the lead as only by... It had a 2-second lead coming to the hairpin, and it almost lost it. That is how quick the Ultima is down the straight. The Apollo is an absolute monster in the corners, though. You barely have to lift with that car through a lot of this course. It's staggeringly good when it gets to the twisty bits. And we move from one extreme to the other again here. The Rimac, the Concept 2, the second most powerful car here, 1,887 horsepower. It's ridiculous how quick this vehicle is in a straight line, but it does weigh 4,300 pounds, and it certainly feels it. Unlike the Devo, that actually gets changed direction really, really well, the Rimac does not. The Rimac, I mean, it's so different compared to the Apollo. Just the mid-corner speed is simply not there in the Rimac. You can see how much it's struggling through that section, but then it's on the power. It's 200, 220, 230. It's down on the Apollo's time. It's close, but it is down by a couple of tenths of a second. The Apollo carried all that corner speed. This will have a quick launch, of course, all-wheel drive, and amazing top speed. But I mean, we're seeing 180 miles an hour through this corner here from the Apollo, and the Rimac is not even close. You can't even contemplate doing that. And again, it can't take that sort of speed onto the bridge. It's really struggling with the understeer through here, although once it is pointing in the right direction, it blasts its way again down towards 180 miles an hour towards this slower section we go. I mean, there's not going to be any problem with traction in the Rimac. It's not going to slide around, of course, being all-wheel drive, but it feels heavy. The front end doesn't want to get turned in. It can't carry the same corner speed. It's 5 seconds down on the Apollo. As soon as it gets to the twisty section, the Rimac just cannot maintain the corner speed anywhere near as well. And it's not just the Apollo. It can't carry anywhere near as much speed as the McLaren either through this sort of section. Again, got to be careful with the Rimac. The front end really wants to understeer. As soon as it's out of the corner, it's again, as soon as it's out of the corner, it just absolutely flies up towards the speed. It's nearly 9 seconds down, but this is where the Rimac is going to come into its own a little bit. This is the party piece. It's not going to be a long enough straight for the Rimac, but it is absolutely going to monster this section. I mean, it's already past 200 miles an hour. It's still going to 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 yet before the finish line. I think that was 253 miles an hour. It's not a great time at 202.7, and the Rimac is down in 6th place. It gets beaten by a second, in fact, with that McLaren Senna. I mean, it made up some time through that final sector. However, it's very big and very heavy, and the front end does not want to get into any of the corners. It's a monster down the straights, and as soon as you can use that power, it is phenomenal, but it cannot carry the corner speed. For our penultimate car here, we have got the Konigseg Jesko rear-wheel drive. A bit of a funky gearbox getting it going. It has a lot of short gears at the start, which does make it a little awkward getting it off the line, certainly compared to some of the all-wheel drive cars that are in all of this. But this is another sort of straight-line speed monster here. I was expecting the Jesko to be good when it got to the corners, but we do have some problems with this car. At the front end, it just doesn't have the grip. It doesn't have the grip that I was expecting to see from this car. As soon as we do get it fired off in a straight line, it is 230 miles an hour, but it's a second down on the Apollo. Okay, yes, some of that is off the start line. The Jesko is a bit difficult to get it going. It loses a good chunk of time compared to a few of the other rear-wheel drive cars, but it's just not able to maintain the corner speed through these sections. Getting onto the bridge, 140 miles an hour. It's more comparable in many ways to the Rimac. It's a little better than the Rimac, getting the front end turned into these corners, and similar to that car, once it does get its power down, it absolutely bolts. And for a lot of these corners, the traction isn't too much of a problem being rear-wheel drive. You see it's struggling. It's 4.5 seconds down on the Apollo. We know the Apollo was absolutely ridiculous through these twisty bits, but the Jesko just does not have even close to an answer. And once again, it doesn't have close to an answer of the Senna even. For example, the Devo is better at getting the front end into these corners. The Jesko, once it's got on the power, shoots away once more, but it just cannot turn with 7.7 seconds. That is a huge gap down. It's a bit of a slide as well from the Konigseg through there, trying to get the power down. That is the one section where it might struggle a little bit in terms of getting that power down. Once it is down, though, of course, again, it monsters its way towards a finish line. It's climbing past 230. It's almost going to get up to 250 mile an hour mark, not quite. The Rimac slightly faster down there. Over the course of the run, the Jesko 202.0, a little faster than that Rimac. Still can't beat the Senna even. It just could not carry the corner speed. It couldn't carry the corner speed of the likes of the Senna, but more curiously, it couldn't carry it even compared to the Devo. That is not quite what I was expecting to see, but the Jesko is down in 6th place. And yeah, that is that. The final car to run, and this is the highest PI car that we will run in this. It is the highest PI car from standard that you find in Horizon 5. This is the Lotus Evija, I think is how it's pronounced. The most powerful car here, 1,973 horsepower, all-wheel drive machine here. It is quite the ridiculous vehicle. Once again, you already start to see the front end, it does not have that grip. It cannot turn in the same way that the Apollo could. It's ridiculously fast in a straight line. There is a problem, though. All of these cars are being run stock, and in stock guys, the Lotus tops out. It's 0.8 of a second up through the first sector, but that's always the sector where it's likely to be strong here. The vehicle, yeah, topping out at 220 miles an hour. I mean, that is quick, let's not forget, but it is buzzing the limiter. Nothing else was tuned for this, so the Lotus won't be either. You can see how much it has to slow down coming onto the bridge. It's slowed down considerably on there, and it's still sliding. It's still really struggling for grip. Ridiculous. Again, the burst of speed, much like we saw from the Rimac. Like we saw from the Jesko, when it gets that burst of speed, it is ridiculous, but it cannot maintain the momentum through these corners. Once again, has to really slow down before coming onto the bridge, and that 0.8 of a second lead has quickly changed. It's now down 2.3 seconds. In just that one sector alone, it's lost nearly 3 seconds to the Apollo. Big slide from the Lotus. In fact, you see the car sort of, it's not really oversteer, more sort of, well, a little bit of oversteer there. It does slide across the mode more than a lot of the all-wheel drive cars were doing here. It's lost further time. It's almost 5 seconds down on that Apollo. Of course, we know this is where it's going to come into its own to an extent. It will, once it gets the power down, be able to blast its way up, but it will hit that limiter. We'll get to 220, and that'll be it for the Lotus. Okay, 221. Still quicker than the Apollo could manage. It runs towards the finish line. It is a little better from the Lotus, a 158.7. But that is not enough for a top 3. The Lotus will go into 4th. So the Apollo, amazingly, rear-wheel drive cars will be 1st and 2nd here. Admittedly, this circuit not the worst, this route not the worst for rear-wheel drive cars, because most of it's all higher speed stuff, but the Apollo takes victory by 0.3 of a second from that Ultima. The Devo will come in 3rd ahead of the Lotus. The Valhalla, all very close for that 3rd, 4th, 5th place spot, all within a second of each other. The Valhalla in 5th. The Senna puts in a great performance to come home in 6th ahead of the Konigseg Jesko. The Rimac could only manage 8th in all of that, despite being the quickest car in a straight line. It just can't carry the quarter speed. Mercedes is down in 9th, and then we have the Zenvo rounding out the table. So the victor is the Apollo. I was surprised, pleasantly surprised. I love this car very much. So the corner speed the Apollo can take is otherworldly. Yes, this route, I think, plays to the Apollo's strengths in some ways. It does not have the top speed. It is running out of speed down a couple of the straights, but the way it can maintain its momentum through the corners, nothing could even get close to it. And that is, yeah, the real strength of the Apollo. The Ultima, I always expect to be running there or thereabouts here. It's so powerful, so light, and while it is a handful through the corners when you get it right, it's very, very quick. So, you know, always expect the Ultima to be there or thereabouts in these kind of tests. The Bugatti might be the biggest surprise of all for me. The Devo, it really does not feel like the heaviest car here. Not by a long shot. It drives very, very nicely for a big, heavy all-wheel drive hypercar. Yeah, it's a great time from the car and drives surprisingly nicely. The Jesko is also a big surprise. I was expecting that to be much higher up. The Rimac, I always know how much of a handful that thing is. It is a brute down the straights, but never been great in the corners. The Jesko, it just couldn't carry corner speed anywhere near like I was expecting it to, which does surprise me. Again, very quick down the straights, but yeah, just no corner speed, and that was not what I was expecting from it whatsoever. The Mercedes, I mean, I did think that might struggle a little bit. It's down on PI, perhaps down on power a little bit. It's a nice car to drive, though, the Merc. I will give it that. It is a nice vehicle to run through this sort of course. It just can't quite compete with much faster, much more powerful vehicles. And the Zenvo was silly. I still like it. I still very much like the Zenvo, even if it's not really in the same league as the other cars that were running here. But it was worth giving it a go. But it just cannot quite compete with much more high-tech vehicles. But there we go. That is going to be it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, a goodbye.